I need to be honest with you for a second. If you're a Seahawks fan right now, there's a lot to analyze. And honestly, some things might have caught you by surprise. You know how this team works. One minute everything seems calm, and the next minute, there's behind-the-scenes movement that starts to paint a completely different picture of what's to come. And I'll tell you, if you've been paying attention to what's been happening lately, you might feel that something is changing again. Not in a bad way. In fact, it's the opposite. It's as if the team is preparing for another winning streak, but doing it in a way that not everyone is noticing yet. But before I tell you, be sure to click the like button and tell me, how long have you been a Hawks fan? Write in the comments. The Seattle Seahawks just received a wave of significant updates straight from head coach Mike Macdonald at the NFL League meetings in Arizona. And if you're a fan trying to understand where this team is heading into the 2026 season, there are some very clear signals that things are lining up in a powerful way behind the scenes. One of the biggest storylines coming out of these meetings revolves around a name that had quietly started to generate concern across the fan base: DeMarcus Lawrence. There had been whispers circulating that the veteran edge rusher, now in the later stages of his career, could be contemplating retirement. And honestly, it wasn't hard to see why those rumors gained traction. Lawrence has been in the league for a long time, built his legacy in Dallas, and already achieved what he came to Seattle for: winning a Super Bowl. But here's where things shift in a big way. Mike Macdonald addressed the situation directly and made it clear that, as things stand right now, DeMarcus Lawrence is expected to return. That statement alone changes the tone of this entire defense heading into next season, because let's not minimize what Lawrence meant to this team in 2025. He wasn't just a contributor. He was one of the most complete defensive players on the roster. According to performance metrics, he graded out as the second-best edge rusher. And when you watched the games, it matched the eye test. He was everywhere. Tackles for loss, quarterback pressures, forced fumbles, even defensive touchdowns. It felt like whenever Seattle needed a momentum-shifting play, number 90 was in the middle of it. And what makes this even more interesting is how he was used. Macdonald doesn't want one-dimensional players on the edge. He's not building a defense around specialists. He wants versatility, players who can stop the run, rush the passer, and create chaos in multiple ways. That's exactly what Lawrence delivered. And because his snap count was managed more carefully compared to his Dallas days, he was able to play faster, more aggressively, and more effectively when he was on the field. So if you're looking for a reason to believe this defense can remain elite, this is it. Getting DeMarcus Lawrence back isn't just a boost. It's a stabilizing force for everything this unit wants to be. Now, shifting to the offensive side, there's another update that fans have been waiting on, and that's rookie wide receiver Torrey Horton. His first season was short but explosive. In just 8 games, he found the end zone 5 times and even added a punt return touchdown. That kind of efficiency immediately put him on the radar as a serious weapon in this offense. But then came the setback, that lingering shin injury that kept dragging on longer than expected. There were real concerns about whether he'd even be ready for the start of key off-season programs, and earlier indications suggested he might miss OTAs and minicamp. Now, here's the encouraging part. Macdonald stated that the expectation is for Horton to be back on the field by training camp. That timeline matters more than it might seem at first glance. Even if he misses part of the off-season, being available for training camp gives him a real chance to reintegrate into the system and compete for a larger role. And make no mistake, this wide receiver room is shaping up to be one of the most dynamic groups Seattle has had in years. You're looking at a combination of explosive playmakers like Jaxon Smith-Njigba, Rashid Shaheed, and Horton himself, players who can change a game in a single snap. Then you layer in more polished route runners like Jake Bobo and Cooper Kupp, and suddenly you have a unit that can attack defenses in multiple ways, both vertically and underneath. Horton, in particular, sits in a very interesting position. He may enter the season as the fourth option on paper, but we already saw him outperform expectations once. He climbed the depth chart before, and there's nothing stopping him from doing it again if he picks up where he left off. And that brings us to another critical development, the situation at running back, specifically involving Zach Charbonnet. Coming off a late ACL injury, there's no sugarcoating the reality. He's likely going to miss a significant portion of the 2026 season. The estimated return window points toward mid to late season, possibly around October or November, depending on his recovery progression. That creates a temporary void, but also an opportunity. Because before the injury, Charbonnet wasn't just a complementary piece. He was effectively part of a 1A, 1B system and ended the season with double-digit touchdowns. His physical running style and nose for the end zone made him a key part of the offense. And when he does return, it could feel like a mid-season acquisition without giving up any assets. A fresh, impactful player stepping back into a system that already knows how to use him. But until then, the Seahawks have to rely on the rest of the room. And this is where things get really intriguing. Despite outside speculation about potential additions like Najee Harris or Joe Mixon, the internal belief within the organization is strong. Macdonald made it clear that they trust the players already in the building. Guys like George Holani, who showed flashes of high-level play, and Kenny McIntosh, who could bring explosiveness if he returns healthy, are part of a group that the coaching staff genuinely believes in. Add in Emmanuel Wilson, and suddenly this isn't a desperate situation. It's a developing one. And maybe the most important takeaway from everything Macdonald said isn't about a specific player. It's about mindset. This team is not approaching 2026 as a group trying to defend a title. In his words, they're not defending anything. This is a new team, a new season, and a new journey. That shift in mentality matters, because the moment you start defending, you risk playing not to lose instead of playing to dominate. And the Seahawks are entering a completely different reality now. They're no longer the hunters. They're the hunted. Last year, this team was overlooked, underestimated, even projected to struggle. Now, they're being discussed as Super Bowl favorites. That changes everything: preparation, expectations, pressure. And the fact that Mike Macdonald is already addressing that internally tells you a lot about the leadership structure being built here. So when you step back and look at the full picture, DeMarcus Lawrence likely returning, Torrey Horton on track for training camp, a running back room that the coaching staff believes in despite injuries, and a clear shift in mindset from the top down. This doesn't look like a team hoping to stay competitive. This looks like a team preparing to stay on top. Now, I want to hear from you. How confident are you in this Seahawks roster heading into 2026 after these updates? And that's exactly where things start to get even more interesting when you project forward into how this team is going to operate once the season actually begins. Because everything we just talked about sets the foundation. But the real story is how all of these pieces come together under pressure. When you look at this Seahawks roster heading into 2026, there's a very clear identity forming, and it starts with how Mike Macdonald is building this team from the inside out. This is not a roster that's being shaped around hype or big-name splashes. It's being built around versatility, depth, and players who can step into multiple roles depending on the situation. And that philosophy is showing up everywhere, especially when you revisit the running back situation. Because even though there are still fans questioning whether Seattle should go out and make a big move, maybe bring in a proven RB1 from outside, the internal messaging hasn't changed. This coaching staff genuinely believes that what they already have is enough to compete. And not just survive. during that stretch without Zach Charbonnet. George Holani is a name that keeps coming up for a reason. When he had opportunities last season, including deep into the playoff run, he delivered. Not just in flashes, but in meaningful moments against high-level competition. That matters. That tells you the staff trusts him when the stakes are highest. And trust like that isn't built overnight. Then you factor in Kenny McIntosh, who's coming off his own injury but brings a completely different dimension to the offense. If he returns at full strength, you're talking about a player who can provide that explosive element the team has been missing since Kenneth Walker is no longer part of the picture. And that's another thing we can't ignore here. This team is transitioning. There are key names that are simply not walking back through that door. Kenneth Walker, Rick Woolen, Kobe Bryant. Those were important pieces. And when you lose players like that, it forces evolution. It forces new leaders to emerge, new roles to be defined. That's why this "we're not defending anything" mentality hits even harder the more you think about it. Because this isn't just a motivational phrase, it's a recognition of reality. The 2026 Seahawks are not the 2025 Seahawks. Even if the record ends up looking similar, the path is going to be completely different. Different contributors, different challenges, different expectations. And speaking of expectations, that might be the biggest adjustment of all. Last year, this team thrived in the shadows. Nobody expected them to rise the way they did. They were free to build momentum, to develop chemistry without the weight of constant scrutiny. That's gone now. Every opponent is going to circle Seattle on the calendar. Every game is going to feel like a statement opportunity for the other side. That's what it means to be the hunted. And this is where coaching becomes everything. Because talent alone doesn't carry you through that kind of environment. Structure does. Accountability does. Preparation does. And from everything we're hearing, Mike Macdonald is already laying that groundwork in a very intentional way. He's talking to players early. He's setting expectations early. He's making sure that leadership isn't just coming from the coaching staff, but from inside the locker room as well. That's how sustained success is built in this league. And if you zoom out for a second, it's kind of wild to even be having this conversation so early in his tenure. Because yes, it's still too soon to start throwing around greatest coach in franchise history conversations. That belongs to Pete Carroll for now. But the fact that Mike Macdonald is even being mentioned in that same breath, this quickly tells you how strong of an impression he's already made. 2 years in, and you're already seeing a clear culture, a clear direction, and most importantly, results. That doesn't happen by accident. So as we head toward training camp, everything becomes about execution. Can DeMarcus Lawrence replicate that elite level of play one more time? Can Torrey Horton stay healthy and carve out a bigger role in an already loaded receiver room? Can this running back group hold the line until Charbonnet returns, and then elevate once he's back in the mix? Those are the questions that are going to define this season, because the ceiling is obvious. This is a team that can absolutely make another Super Bowl run. The talent is there. The structure is there. The belief inside the building is clearly there. But the margin for error is smaller now. And that's the price of success in the NFL. Now, if you want to stay on top of everything happening with the Seattle Seahawks as these storylines continue to develop, make sure you're subscribed, drop a like on the video, and don't go anywhere. Click on the video that's on your screen right now, because the next big update is already waiting for you. And if you want the latest Seahawks news first, this is the place to be. Go Seahawks!